All right, we are live with David Whitehead. Thanks for joining us in Grimerica Outlawed.
Hey guys, thank you so much for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Fellow Canadian. For some reason I thought you were back east, but I guess you live in BC, right? Have you always been
I'm
in
in
BC?
British Columbia. Yeah.
Have you always been there, or were you in Ontario for a while?
I was in Ontario. Yeah.
Oh, you were? Okay.
I grew up all over the place. I've lived
Yeah.
all over Canada.
Okay.
And but now, yeah, British Columbia. I'm kind of hiding out in the woods up here, close to the American border, close to Washington State.
Yeah, nice.
You know, not too far away. So
yeah, soon you'll be like you could be like a little bit of a state yourself.
yeah, that's it. That's where we're probably headed. I don't even mind it, to be honest, based on where we're at.
I know, it's so weird. It's so weird because this whole new new fear is sort of split up people like ourselves too. Because Darren and I are like, let's do it, because we're just like, in my mind, Canada's just beyond economical repair. It's BER. It's done. It's
yeah.
And then now all of a sudden a bunch of people are piping up, oh, you're not going to fight for your country. I'm like, it's been toast for a while now. I mean, and I was just thinking about it today. I'm like, when people argue, like, I'm like, you guys were ready to tattle on us for having too many people over for Christmas, or they're rat on us, whatever, and I was just sort of mulling over some of those memories about like why I don't even really, I don't have the same trust in the public anymore or anything,
Yeah. Oh, I'm there too. I mean, look
at
like
after king. That's like the number one reason should be that we have a fucking king still that can like ixnay our leader and our parliament at the stroke of a pen. Maybe we could pretend it's ceremonial, but he could still do it. I mean, that's my thing, is you don't have sovereignty right now. You have like a puppet thing that as long as the king is okay with it.
Yeah, well, it's you're right. Like we all are already a state. We're a vassal state of the British Crown Corporation. That's what I was trying to say. Yeah. And we've been like that since for a long time. We've had better days, that's for sure. But given where we're at, like, we don't really have a lot of top tier leaders to be picking right now that are on Trump's level. I'm shocked we haven't even heard from the conservative leader, Pierre Poilievre, about Trump's inauguration or anything. Like, he's very silent on so many things. And then he'll do good on some other things, but there's just too many questions about the guy. Even though I and pretty much all the other Canadians would take him over Trudeau any day of the week.
Over almost anybody, really. There's nobody else. The depth is Pierre. Really.
Yeah. Or like I would put my cat in front of Trudeau. Like, you know what I mean? Like, and then Maxime Bernier, the only other guy that, is out there, he'll be lucky to even win a single seat in Parliament, let alone take the Prime Minister's office from Mark Carney, right? Who's going to win the Liberal leadership race most likely, and then just be installed as the Prime Minister until there's an election without even a single Canadian vote. Like, what the hell is that? Style. So what are we going to do? Yeah. Our Constitution is shit. We got totally, like, look at the pandemic and what happened. Look what happened with the trucker convoy. That was our best shot. That's the best shot Canada's ever had at any sort of, let's try to rally together for freedom. And look what happened. And look what the rest of the country to this day still does when it comes to the trucker. They roll their eyes. Yep. They start shaming it.
Yep.
We're so flooded with people that are coming into this country that don't give a shit about this country. So we're not a country. We're not a serious country. We haven't been for a long time.
Trucker convoy wasn't even the closest we ever got to anything. It was like, we never really tried. It was never going to achieve anything except at best what it achieved, which was stopping that one tyrannical movement from moving forward, which is a commendable thing that it achieved. But it was never rolling back the bullshit that they've been doing to take away freedoms in Canada for the last 50 or 80 years. That's not even on the table. It's like, I mean, the analogy I always use, or the example, not the analogy I always use, is to go back to 1993 or 1994 when the Conservatives were freaking out about the Firearms Act. It's unconstitutional because of this. It's unconstitutional because of that. And then 6 months later, they got a super fucking majority government. And what doesn't happen? Nothing happens to the Firearms Act. And I got real concerns that that's the same thing we're going to see happen here. we can give you a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and we'll give you a couple of your guns back, maybe the ones that are manufactured in Canada, and you know, that's going to be it. They tend to talk a big game. So I worry that even the trucker convoy was just, you know, it was just too little too late, and it was only about like, it was about the fact, you know, we shouldn't even be talking about it on YouTube, but it was about the show. It was about the one sort of thing. It wasn't sort of expanded to this manifesto of all these things that are crumbling around us, or the quote unquote freedom. So what I would argue is the closest that we'll ever come to actual freedom is what's knocking on the door right now. And that would be the ability for provinces to enter what is the United States of America and get some real like state power, get some real individual power to themselves, and maybe some rights and the individual for people. Because the other thing that happened during COVID is we became prisoners up here. Like, you know, you had buddies down south that were able to run to Florida or Texas, or, you know, I had buddies that went to Tennessee. There was these little havens where we couldn't go nowhere. You know, we were just, it was like, nah, man, you can't leave, you can't come, you can't go, you can't. So, I mean, a part of me thinks that this what's sort of in front of our face right now that everyone's sort of half scoffing at, I mean, could be the closest to actual freedom that Canada's come in 100 years.
Well, hey, man, like I may have a slightly more optimistic view of the convoy and what it achieved ultimately, but I agree with your conclusion that this is where we're at. Like, no matter how you shake it, we have only a few options, and there's a time window that I think a lot of people aren't really thinking about. We don't have 50 years to build up the PPC to save the day, or any other party that you want to try to create. You know, we just like, China, you're going to be ruled by China, or you're going to be ruled under the US enterprise. Like, there is no other choice. Okay. Now, Canada could maybe try to grow up, become a serious country, get unified suddenly out of nowhere on all these political issues, maybe do a constitutional reform and create like a free, sovereign, serious country, beef up the military. But this is, I'm already like laughing at myself as I'm talking, because that's just not going to happen under any
nobody to make that happen. And
so
there's no
even
will.
without it, I don't even think China's a real threat, because let's be honest, at the end of the day, when the US wants the Alberta fucking oil patch, they're coming to get the Alberta oil patch. You know, they're not. And this little like this poke that we're doing right now, where we're like kind of half threatening that we're going to shut the oil off, I mean, is like poking the bear. They're when they want that oil, they're going to get it one way or another. And I was just thinking about today on my way home, I'm like, God damn, he just signed this things like drill baby drill in Alaska. And I'm like, does Alaska have like harbors for exporting huge oil tankers, or how is all this oil getting down to the refineries in fucking Houston? And I'm like, something tells me it's going straight through Alberta, or through, you know, it's going through Canada some way. And
well, Danielle Smith was there, wasn't she? I think she was the only Canadian representative that went to the inauguration and to Mar-a-Lago. And so, like, you know, there's people she's in Alberta, right? So, like, either way, Alberta has been trying to separate all the time also.
Exactly. Alberta should be at the front of the line to join in the States, in my opinion. Because you're probably, I'm assuming you're this side of them coastal mountains. So you're like in that spot that would probably end up over with us if we sort of end up going that route.
No, you're farther west, right?
I'm on the island. I'm on Vancouver Island.
Yeah, I didn't know if you wanted to say your location or not, but
yeah,
there could be trouble.
Yeah. So you're in a unique spot, actually.
Yeah.
It should be its own thing almost.
Totally. The options are that, like, you either stay as we are, which is not a country right now. It's basically just we're a globalist satellite state, right? We become a serious country, not in the cards of reality. What are the other options? Oh, we just go completely with China, which I think is one of the number one threats. And then we join with the US, because we'll actually get our borders defended, our oceans, like, we'll actually have defense. Like, Canadians don't even realize we pay America to defend us, because we literally could not defend ourselves on our own against China, Russia, North Korea, name your Iran. Like we're not at that place right now, right? So where are we going to go right now with realistic options? I really don't see any, if like freedom and abundance is the goal of the average Canadian.
And even if it's not I don't think that the world exists that the US lets China take us over. If it gets to that, then
no.
They're just going to drive up and like they'll head up around 9, and by like dinner time we'll be Americans. And
you're probably right. I know, I see what you mean. I just mean,
we're in the West, like, to finish that thought, if we're in the West, Saskatchewan, Alberta, I mean, we're talking about never mattering in this quote unquote democracy that's called Canada. Just never. You never mattered. All the votes are back east. They're always going to be back east. So just shut up and keep fucking pumping the oil when we say you can, and as much as we say you can. So, I mean, for us, you could say that Canada's missing this level of freedom, but for Saskatchewan and Alberta and these prairie provinces especially, I mean, we've been under the thumb of whatever it is out east for 100 years, and it's just like, for us especially, I would argue for the Western Canada especially, not seriously considering joining the States is a huge mistake. I mean, you're just going to keep getting fucking steamrolled by Ottawa, and at the very least, it should be, if you don't want to give up your sovereignty as a Canadian, then it should be a very frank discussion about what the future looks like moving forward diplomatically between the East and the West, if that remains to be the same. And I think the same case for the Indians in Canada. Now's the time when they were saying, hey man, if we were in the States, we might own some shit and they wouldn't be taking the kids off the reserve. And there's a bunch of stuff that they managed to figure out like 50 years ago that you guys still can't sort out. So I can just picture these giant factions of Canada where it seems to me, once you can like get past that initial, wait, what the fuck do you say? Nah, it's crazy. That's not happening. Once you can sort of get past that shock, you can sort of land on, well, it seems inevitable in some ways that certain parts of Canada are ending up in the States. So why not just expedite the process? I mean, to think that it would have been in my lifetime would have seemed crazy even like fucking 6 weeks ago.
Oh, I know. So many things happening are like that right now. And it's true. I mean, when we say Canadians are worried about losing Canadian sovereignty, I'm like, you should have been worried already, bro. We've already lost it. You just lost it to the people that infiltrated your gates and live in, they're the ones calling all the shots, and they work for the roundtable groups that are far above them. You know what I mean? Like, what sovereignty are you talking about? The sovereignty to be censored, to, look at your price of food, gas, look at the way your taxes are going up. Like, I'm a business owner. Crime. Like, we could just keep going. Like, Canada's basically a Democrat-run city. Like that, you just compare it to all of the same stats we're seeing in New York and, Portland and all that. And that's kind of what we've got here. And I think that a lot of these people put in from both parties are agents of the agenda to erode the country and build us into basically a globalist enclave, which is what Trudeau basically said in the open when he got in, and he did just that. So I don't know where people want to go next. You were either under the British crown, and we can get into that history anytime, or you are, you're going to have to pick your ruler. Which empire are you going with? Like, that's where
that's kind of where I put it too, is like, you can call it the New World Order, but it looks like it's shaping up to be a couple world orders, and there's pick your side. Right now, the way things are going in Canada, and when I look to, if you want an example, in my opinion, of where fucking Canada's headed, look to the UK. Look to the UK and fast forward 30 years, 40 years, 50 years. It seems like they're a generation ahead of us on a lot of things, whether it's cameras or, giving you a ticket for driving into the ultra low, super duper emission zone with the wrong type of car at the wrong time of day. And you get the ticket on your phone that second. And I just feel like, and I have a buddy that comes over from the UK, and he says the same thing. He's like, man, I feel like this is how the UK was 50 years ago. And now he's like, you guys have this lost sort of thing here. So it's like, we're heading into that. It doesn't look great. People are going to jail for 7 fucking years for what they post on social media. And little girls getting raped is just like, what are you going to do? It's a cultural thing. So
Well,
I
and
don't like
that's
that
one bus
picture.
stop. The next bus stop is Venezuela, right? Like that's where we're headed at. And in terms of like a chronology, if people want to know how the movie ends, if we keep this track, like just there's so many historical examples we can see where these ideologies are tried, tested, and we know exactly what happens. And the way we're going, we're headed exactly there. So we either stay on that train, create a whole new train from scratch that can compete with the superpowers of the world, which is a pipe dream, or we kind of have to find some strategic alliances, because this is World War III. This is how it's being broken down. And I personally think that someone like Trump and the team he's putting in place and that entire vision is completely in opposition to what the globalists were trying to bring in place with their NAFTA or even the North American Union concept that everybody's worried about. If there's these deals, I'm like, yeah, this is different management. It's run constitutionally. And let's also remember that in America, I was on another US show the other day, and you got to remember, like, there's the federal government, which Trump is trying to shrink down and not have the power that it has over the states. He's trying to give the power back to the states. And then there's like state sovereignty and state constitutions, right? So like you can go to one state for certain rules and another state for other rules. So Canada, you're going to get a better deal towards sovereignty being a state in the American empire, if you want to call it that, than you are trying to go it alone or trying to stick with the Chinese, the CCP globalist empire, right? Like those are literally the options. I don't see any other ones.
You know, the more I've been thinking about it lately on why, because I'm of the same opinion that Canada is not a real country. It's never been, and that's not to say
the same thing. It's not a serious country.
It's not to say that I haven't had my moments of Canadian pride, you know, but
me too. Yeah.
At heart, I'm a fucking Indian. So I'm under occupation by some fucked up government that, you know, convoluted you into thinking it was all right for a while there. But then it's like, nah, it's not. And I think that bit about Canada not being a serious country kind of hits that thing, and there's different theories on why that is. And lately I'm sort of landing on that, you know, it was really just to keep the US's hands off of it as long as fucking possible. You start looking at how quickly the Confederation started trying to form. I was actually just reading some shit today for a thing I'm writing about how hastily the fucking Confederation was written for the Saskatchewan, Alberta, you know, we came flying over here making hasty deals with the provinces and with the Indians just to try and get here because the states were pushing so hard to get here. And then we fucking got it. Yeah, we got it. And then we just didn't do shit with it for 150 fucking years. Like really nothing with it. We did a little develop here, pull a little gold there. But the one thing you'll get from driving from one side of Canada is another is we really didn't do fucking anything with the place. We really haven't touched it. And I would argue that that's because, you know, it was always just to keep it away from the Americans for as long as possible. Maybe because they are the threat to that new world order.
Well, I wanted to ask David that because it does feel like this has been a controlled demolition. Like they've wanted to collapse it. Really, the way they're, and the lies and how obvious everything is and how unaffordable everything is. Like it's literally collapsing in front of our eyes. Do you think that was for the world? Like, because I thought at first, you know, it's for the WEF and all these sort of ideological things, and they want us in Australia and the UK to be a vanguard into this new sort of like globalization. But now it almost feels like it was done for the States. I mean, do you think it was done for either of those on purpose, or?
Well, I mean, I think of it as like the people that are put into a position in Canada are installed and they're represented. Like, yeah, you get some votes or whatever, but these people that you're given to pick from are put there by people that don't really have any allegiance specifically to Canada. They have their own global agenda. And that's the real agenda, is they want to erase national sovereignty. They want to bring in a totalist system. So if you're going to have a totalist world system run by a very small group of unelected bureaucrats, right, then you have to erode the idea of having a sovereign nation to begin with. You have to play pretend for a while, and then you got to get to the real thing. So this is all the moves I think we've been seeing in all these different Western countries. The target is the destruction of Western civilization and the pillars that built it up, because those pillars directly get in the way of these people that want this globalist agenda. So they need to erode. Obviously, America is their number one target. And yes, there's been corruption in America. America has a deep state of corruption that people like Trump and others have been speaking about forever. And so when we say America in Canada, we often are talking about the many crimes we've seen at the hands of America, unquote, which is really just the same. It's another glove of the same people controlling our own country that got in charge of those systems, right, in America. So I think that if anything, that the implosion, like we've got the admission from Klaus Schwab, who said that they had successfully penetrated all these cabinets with their ideological representatives. And he used Trudeau and Canada as a specific example of that. Then we have like actual admissions and statements from CSIS, which is our intelligence community, telling us we've got numerous, probably more than they're willing to admit, known embedded foreign agents working in our government, and they won't tell us who those people are. It's kind of like the Diddy lists right now. We don't know who the freaking guys are that we know for a fact are foreign assets to foreign countries. And then, you know, you go it out. So I look at it from the big picture more than I do zeroing in on all the details, because I've been following that narrative for the longest. And I know that this is about Game of Thrones, man. This is about who wields the ring of power to rule them all. And, you know, whereas the idea of America, right, which is just starting to come back in vogue with people like Trump, but the idea of America was to move away from that centralization of power dynamic and instead have a constitutional republic that gives the individual and the states their own sovereignty within a framework, right? Whereas these guys want that to be orchestrated at a roundtable level that issues that worldwide, like the way, look at the WHO and what it was trying to do with its little treaty agreements or whatever that everybody rejected because they saw immediately this is totalitarian, right? So they want that kind of policy for the world on all the issues. And Trudeau and these types of people are there to systematically, I think, implode the country over time to a point where it has no choice but to accept, say, a global digital currency, or they have, like, just how we're talking about how we better jump ship and go with the US for now. They want us to be in the position of saying that with them, like, oh, we better not have a country. We better just jump on board the Great Reset, the Green New Deal, 15-minute cities, global technocracy. You know, like they want us jumping on that ship. And now that people are rejecting that, the only reason they're rejecting it is because they're seeing an alternative in places like Argentina with Milei and some of these other little places where you see some fighting back, right? So I think it's a much bigger agenda than just Canada, obviously, and even the US. But the US is the only power in the world that could actually successfully fight NATO, the UN, the Club of Rome, and those types of people. So that's why we're literally, Canada isn't really involved right now. We're sort of waiting to see what Big Brother can do to help us, you know?
Do you ever wonder why the West didn't let us prosper instead, and they would have been able to control everything much more if they just didn't make it collapse so much? I mean, if they would have kept things sort of rolling, it seems to me like they could have just had us in the palm of their hand if we would have just been able to have some savings, some easy to afford stuff, a vacation every now and then, like just a little more like.
Oh, you're talking about like maybe they rushed it and they went too open with it?
Yeah, something like, I just don't see why, because they're going to get way more resistance this way, you know, you'd think.
Well, maybe this brings the idea that they didn't have a choice because someone's outmaneuvering them right now.
Right. Yeah. So it is different factions, probably. Yeah.
Different factions. And then the previous factions who were running, like think of the history of the deep state globalist players in American politics. Okay. You've got you can go to, I mean, they shot JFK and then you move from there and you go through and you've got the Bushes, the Cheneys, the Clintons, the Obamas. These are agents that do not represent America and the American vision or the Constitution. These are the people from both sides, Republican, Democrat, going in and slowly whittling away at those constitutional values and the whole thing. So it was like they were working on their version of imploding America. And that's where Trump came in and actually had a chance, was he put the spotlight on them and say, hey, look, they're trying to destroy America. I could do better. And that's why America flipped over time. But Canada having that kind of situation show up in time to save us from what's coming, it's just, I don't see it. You know, I don't see it happening.
What do you think the carrot that starts off the guy, because I think they could get most of us on the dollar. You know, if they start thinking, we're not going to come, you're not America yet, you're still just Canada, but your money's gone to shit. We'll just give you a 1-for-1 on the dollars right now, one-time deal. You're already trading all your commodities in US dollars anyway. So
I don't have a problem with it.
I feel like that's the one that if you talk to like anyone, they're like, I could.
Well, and I don't think that'll be the deal though. The deal from Trump is you become a 51st state, you get here's what you get. Here's the package. Here's the package of what you get if you sign up to my subscription service.
I'm not signing up
with the dollar.
Yeah, but I'm not
all these things. You get border protections. You get, a constitutional protection, which Canada has never had that level of a constitutional protection, even from the good old days. We were more of a socialist vassal state than we ever were like some constitutionally free country with a bunch of freedom fighter. We never were that. Come on.
It'll be worse though if we don't split it up. I mean, we got to be like 50 through 60. Otherwise, we got a problem.
What do you mean, like?
Because otherwise, Alberta's right back into the getting fucking voted in by the East. The Quebec and Ontario are still going to steamroll us like the city steamroll the rest of California, for example.
Right, but they could be maybe Canada. Maybe Canada won't come in as one single state.
3 states, 4
Oh
states.
yeah, it's going to have to be 5 or 6. You're going to have to do the Maritimes, Quebec, Ontario, the three middle provinces, and BC or something.
That'd be good.
Yeah. Ontario can be Canada. They could hold out.
They can stay Canada. You can team up with the Bloc Québécois and keep Canada all you freaking want.
Quebec is out the door instantly. It's just Ontario. They could just
everybody else
Canada.
Yeah.
No, the states might not want Quebec. They might just say no. Like that's enough. Like
they'll do their own thing. They'll go do.
Well, and if he audits Ontario's numbers and takes a look at what's going on over there, he's gonna be like, yeah. I don't know. The
Maritimes
take that one
in though.
Yeah. No, there's great people in Ontario. Don't get me wrong, but I mean, come on, they're outnumbered right now over there.
Yeah, totally.
I feel a bit like that in BC. I mean, there's in the rural parts of British Columbia. Yeah. There are lots of old school, patriotic, Canadians, right? But then you get into the cities, and like everywhere, that's where the shit starts. Where it's just like, oh, forget it. Like nobody wants that. Nobody wants Vancouver. Okay, trust me. It used to be one of the most beautiful cities in the world.
I grew up there.
Run into the ground by the destroyers, the people who destroy and they don't build because they're these people we're talking about, right? And we just had actually in British Columbia, I don't know if you guys followed this, the whole election fraud situation, John Rustad and all that. Yeah. So there's fraud, and now they've got evidence of it, and now he's trying to fight back against it. He was initially he was like, I accept the results.
Well, yeah, he did
I got a question for you. Let's do a little quiz, Dave. Can I call you Dave?
Sure. Yeah.
What percentage of your your government in BC, your whatever you call it, your BC representatives, what percentage do you think were not born in Canada?
What
not
percentage
just from another country, not just from
born in Canada?
We're actually born in another country, moved in here, and are now MLAs in your government.
I wouldn't know exactly, but I'm going to go with like 90+%.
No, it's not that high. It was 21% or something.
Okay, like it looks like it's more than that though. And the guys that are born and raised are.
If we started doing second gen, I mean, it would start to get weird. We'd be racist if we did that. We can't do that.
Look, it's not about race. It's about good ideas versus bad ideas. That's the end of the
story.
Well,
I would argue that it is about race a little bit. You should not be allowed to run. You should not be allowed to be in the government of a country that you weren't born in. I mean, you really shouldn't be. You shouldn't be able to be a dual citizen either. And I'd say that. I mean, I don't have any interest in being in the government. I'd rather be a dual citizen than be in the government. But if you're gonna be representing constituents and stuff like that, I feel like you can't have.
You couldn't have just moved over from India.
Just moved over. You need to have been born and raised sort of in the culture that you're now going to govern and make laws based on. And I just think it's a slippery slope to start letting. I mean, federally, it's almost 10%.
Yeah.
And I bet you can guess which
country. Well, we definitely have people here in all the federal, provincial that are brand new and they're just here and they're advocating for their country in our country, right? Like, obviously that's a problem. But in the end, if you have someone that's ideologically aligned and proven, some of these guys, look at like people like Vivek and some of these other guys, right? I think that's a different story. I think it depends on what's your track record, what are your values. That should be the real focus, right? And what are you basing those values upon? So what's your worldview, what's your policy, what's your track record? Like, there's certain checks and balances that can be in place that used to be, but aren't really anymore, that definitely need to be fixed, because in the end, you do need someone. If you're going to have government of any level, you need someone that is actually going to represent the will of the people and answer to them. And if you're not going to have that, then you don't really have a serious government. You don't have a serious country. And that's where we've been at for a long time. And a lot of, you know what? Trudeau was born in Canada, I think, right? Or was it Cuba? Or one of the, I don't know. But anyways.
Well, he was born in Canada, but I don't think that negates the thing that we shouldn't have Indians running the place. At least not the dots. I mean, if we're going to have 20% of our government be Indians, they should be Indians from Canada, not people that were born,
yes.
in India that are flying fucking Khalistani flags, and it's crazy. It's no other country in the world. No, I was just listening to Graham and I's episode from a while back on it, but there's no other country in the world that would allow this to happen.
No, obviously not. Which tells you a lot about our country. It's just not that serious. And I hate to say it, because I was born and raised in Canada. Both of my grandfathers fought for, in world wars, and I was raised with the patriotic thing and all that. And the way I look at it is the country left me before I left it. And I'm not trying to leave it. I'm just trying to think about what's the best way to save it, or save freedom in general for my children wherever I live. Like, we're at that point where the whole world is up against with a gun stuck to its head.
Yeah.
And if America and Trump didn't happen, we would already be in the downward spiral all over the place, and there wouldn't really be any kind of exit plan. Right.
Yeah, I agree.
So we're not in a place to be picky choosy right now. And you can still maintain the culture of Canada in a state, you could still maintain that and say, yeah, we are definitely different than Texas. We're definitely different than New York. Thank God. But we're going at it alone against the powers that be right now. And given our conditions, that's the other thing. You were talking about the economy. Like, what are we going to do about the situation we're in with who's going to come in with a magic wand and fix it? I don't even think Trump could fit. It's like almost like declare bankruptcy and start a new business. Like, that's where I would be at.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, and even the other problem is that we find ourselves completely at the mercy of the United States economy. Anyway, we could talk a big game about, well, we'll tariff you back. Okay. They get 2% of their stuff from us. We get like 70% of our stuff from them. I mean, it's a huge problem. It's a huge imbalance. It's just
we're not at the negotiating table there. That makes me laugh. When I saw Trudeau come out today and start talking tough about, was it French's ketchup instead of Heinz ketchup? Like, get the
But it's not even just that. We're fucking months away from actual bread lines in Canada.
Yeah.
Actual bread lines. And for people think I'm being hyperbolic, I mean, the mayor of Kingston just came out this week and said that they have a food emergency. This is outside of all the food banks, everything that they've got to try and feed people in Kingston. 1 in 3 households still don't have enough food. What are they going to do to solve that? I'm going to tell, I mean, it's not going to be handing out loaves of bread out of the back of a fucking truck, but the government is going to step in some capacity this year in several places across Canada and take responsibility for feeding people.
And that's
fucking a bread line in fucking modern day Canada in 2025 is we're like weeks away from right now. And we're, I don't think there is any saving the Canadian economy at this point. I feel like all the solutions require too much time to put into place. And to add that into why we're a puppet of the US anyway, it's like, even if we want to start pumping our oil or our natural gas out of here to start making some money, which we could do to start making some real money, or we'll make some mines and we'll mine some lithium and shit, and we'll just start making that money. But all that shit's a decade, if we started today,
5 to 10 years away
in the ground today, it's a decade away. And the chances are you're 5 years away from putting a shovel in the ground. So I don't know. how the fuck we're pulling out of this. And the interesting thing is that the US has a problem where half the world is seemingly about to send back its dollars. So they're going to have all these extra dollars anyway. I mean, I was listening to someone argue today, well, why would the US ever give you $1? I was like, but man, they might give you a 1.5 in a one-time deal, because if China and BRICS are going to start changing oil amongst themselves in currencies other than the dollar and sending back all their, if even a third of the world isn't using the dollar as reserve currency anymore, then, I don't know the exact numbers, but there's several trillions of dollars that are about to wash up on the shores of America. And what better thing to do with it than hand it over to the Canadians and the Mexicans?
Well, it looks like Trump's been investing in AI, 500 billion in AI and 500 billion to go to Mars or whatever his Stargate program is. So
yeah, well, he's going to invest in all kinds of stuff. And that's the thing about that AI and all that shit. Like, everybody's all freaked out about it, and I am too. And we should be, holy crap, like, what, we don't want iRobot to happen. But here's the thing: Pandora's box has been opened. It's not going back. Yeah. So we're at a point where we just got to manage it. And who do you want managing that shit? You want Klaus Schwab and gang managing that shit, or do you want someone like Trump and those guys? You know what I mean?
I know.
And so there's your choice.
I was thinking that today.
Pandora's box sucks anyway. I mean, I don't get the AI thing. I mean, it draws some pretty pictures and it can whip up a couple of fucking cool paragraphs, but my phone's still trying to sell me the shit I bought for Christmas.
Well, yeah, there's a lot of dumb purposes for it, but the way, like, when you get into the level of where they're at, and it's not even out public level yet, the technology, like, that technology could liberate the world or it could enslave the world. And that's either way it goes, right? So, there's that issue that we have to think about as to who's going to manage that, right? And how are we going to regulate that? Or how are we going to, what kind of checks and balances can be put in place to mitigate the damaging side of that, right? So just because Trump and Elon and gang are investing in that doesn't make them the bad guys. But at the same time, humanity in general probably doesn't realize the toys we're playing with, and there could be backlash no matter what we do. But that's too late anyways. We're here. This is where we're at. And I find, like, when people are thinking about these issues, the one challenge that, and I have it too, is to try to think of these issues in the way we're talking about right now, which is like with all the nuance and all the factors and all the context that goes with talking about this. If you just start talking to the average Canadian about 51st State, they're immediately going back to TDS syndrome and what CBC told them and all the things, and what Trump said about Rosie O'Donnell and all the bad George Bush invading Iraq and all that. And that's the end of the calculation. They can't keep up with the discussion in their own heads to understand this is a totally unique, unprecedented, historic, different scenario than what we were facing maybe 10, 20 years ago when it came to talking about Canada-US relations. Totally different ball game now. And so it's important, I think, for people to think about this in context of all these issues that are all intersecting with each other at the same time, which is hard. It's hard. Like, trust me, I struggle with it. I'm sure we all do, but it's what's necessary if you want to get a better read on what's happening and then make a better decision on where you think we should be heading right now.
I was thinking about this today because, I was thinking about Trump getting rid of the censorship and whether he does it or not, or whether, like, I even believe him or not. The difference is that the other side is actively censoring, and he's even at least saying that he's going to get rid of it. I mean, whether it happens or not, it's hard not to at least be excited about the prospect and the fact that everybody now knows about all these issues, right? Whether it's censorship or, I mean, talk of any conspiracy or many conspiracies that we've been talking about the last 5 or 10 years is like mainstream all of a sudden. I mean, there's been such a massive shift that, you've got guys like, Joel Salatin in the government and guys like the Matt Lohmeyer, that's been on the show. Like, we're seeing, like, even like, milieu, like people from our milieu at the higher sort of echelons are participating somewhat in the government. I mean, it's hard not to be excited with this huge narrative shift. So I guess to lead into a bit of a question with that, we've seen sort of a shift in the new media, the new narrative on the right, and it's culminated in basically like yesterday's inauguration, and we got the billionaires there. And I mean, now it's shifted so much now. We've got Zuckerberg and Bezos even in there. I mean, it's like they can smell the wind, or they know what's going on. I mean, how do we watch out for controlled ops? I mean, I know like a lot of people were already sort of calling. I have a hard time with the control op thing in general because I feel like it's very risky, and it might be like what Steve Poikonen says, controlled opportunism. Like it's opportunities that people, take that are sort of controlled. But what's your thought about the whole shift and controlled ops and all that, especially with this thinking about censorship, like, because we were just talking about visibility before the show and YouTube and all that. Like, we do have a chance here to come out of maybe a bit of a censorship bubble, and even if it's not 100% of it, if it's any better than it is right now, that's huge for people like us.
Yeah, no, it's important. And I mean, when it comes to whether or not Trump is going to do it or not, I just say look at the track record, and look at the people he's brought in and their track record. So I'll tell you right now, I don't honestly think, whatever people think about Elon Musk, I'm not saying the guy's perfect or he has a perfect track or whatever, but like, forget about all that stuff for a second. If that guy had not walked in with a kitchen sink to Twitter headquarters and put his own money in to buy that shit, we would not be having this conversation. I'm pretty confident in saying that. Trump would not have gotten the level of optics that he got because there was still the massive amount of following going on X, and that there was way less censorship, and it's getting better over time, right? So, and then we had Rumble pop up, that's just exploding and competing with YouTube. We've had other sites. So like the fact that this conversation can even still continue at all, and that if Trump had not been in the picture bringing light to this, we wouldn't have had this conversation, right? That's what I think. It tells me that when he goes and signs an actual executive order that anybody can go to the White House website right now and go read top to bottom, you tell me if you don't think he's serious. He's serious because also he has the unique knack that a businessman of his stature, who's been in the public eye his whole career, knows that the average career politician will never know, which is the true heartbeat of the American people and the true opinion polls and how they really feel. So he knows, and so does Zuckerberg, and so does Bezos, who I don't want them to get away with the crimes they've committed. But you wonder, maybe Trump went in and made some deals with people in order to get ahead in other areas. Maybe he said, hey, I see that you were surrounded by this sort of control grid of people in your network. I see that the Democrats pressured you to do all this. I get it. You're still not off the hook, but your sentence or your punishment will be far less severe if you just join my side and help me get rid of the censorship on your platforms. What does Zuckerberg do? He goes, fuck it, I'm going to go train jiu-jitsu, do some magic mushrooms, and go to UFC events, start becoming a little more testosterone, and I'm switching teams. Like he's like, fine, I'll sign the deal and kiss the ring. And then on. And he makes you wonder, like, is that them? Oh, but it also could be what you said, Graham. It's a good point. Maybe it's just that they're seeing the shift in the zeitgeist of the public mind going, look, I'm not going to make any money if I keep going with the woke shit. I'm just not going to make any money. So I'm going, and Bezos too. Maybe they don't give a fuck either way, but it's still good for the American people and for us because they're going to go with the trend that honestly Trump and gang helped create. And obviously people like us who've had our platforms and we've been trying to educate people about censorship. But I think he's more than serious. I think he's coming in there, kicking the door in and saying, let's redefine, let's look at that treason allegation again, sedition, interfering with elections, and then see what role did the government play in those areas and what role did these social media tech giants play and the media, the mainstream media. And let's just eliminate all the bad actors. And maybe we'll buy MSNBC and give it to Alex Jones. And maybe we'll get Elon to buy TikTok and maybe and they're just shaking shit up. But in the end, the whole policy is we're just not doing the censorship thing anymore, whether you like it or not. And so I think that's where it's going to go. And then your final thing about COINTELPRO, there's definitely COINTELPRO. There's definitely groups out there that are pretending they're wolves in sheep's clothing. They're trying to pretend to be MAGA and patriotic and freedom-based, but they're really something else. So there's that's there. But I also think there's sort of an over suspicion of that in our movement, where we think like everybody that doesn't agree or do every single thing that we like is somehow an Illuminati agent or something.
It's
ridiculous, right? So I think a balanced viewpoint on that is a recommended way to go.
Yeah, I would totally agree with you about that. Well, what about, I mean, sorry to jump right into all the politics right off the bat. We just kind of dove right into the deep end, but it's fun talking to somebody like yourself, who's a fellow Canadian, but we haven't had a podcast with you yet. And it's amazing to see how you're coming from a different angle, but we're on the same page about a lot of stuff. It's always amazing to just to hook up with somebody like that, where it's like, oh man, we're coming to the same conclusion here from a different angle. But what about a little bit about yourself and how long, you did your Cult of the Medic stuff? I want to learn a little bit about you for 5 minutes. How did you enter into this whole realm, and how long ago was it?
Oh, I appreciate it. I've been doing this for about 20 years. I did it, there was a few things that got me interested. I started having interest in maybe bigger subjects like comparative religion, mythology, history. I'm interested in ancient civilizations, and I like some of the.
So you're a white supremacist then?
I guess, because I like studying history. Sure. I like the whole subject of paranormal stuff, UFOs. I was on Ancient Aliens and The Unexplained and all that. I did shows with them. And then I had to stop that, by the way, because of the pandemic and the Canadian hotel situation, where they just didn't want to pay for me to come down, do a shoot for a day, and then have to live in a hotel for a week before I'm allowed back in my country. So I lost that gig. So I went into independent, I guess, research and podcasting. And I started my show Truth Warrior I started that probably back in 2008, but it was really small. I was just basically calling guys on Skype and interviewing them about stuff. And then it blew up a little bit, and that channel got censored in the 2020 era. So I went on to Rumble. I went on to these other platforms. I started making Cult of the Medics, which is just an independently created, glamorized podcast documentary series that I made, where I was just at my basement making the basically like a time capsule of research I had on the bigger picture of the history of the medical industrial complex, and then also weaving in what was going on with the pandemic, and then weaving in some of the bigger meta subjects as well. So it was just kind of a mishmash, and I just keep doing independent content. I'm now mostly on X, Substack, and Rumble. Those are sort of my main platforms now. I also do a project